Good evening, everyone. Welcome to week 6 of the Sustainable Small Farming and Ranching Whole Farm Planning class. We hope that you had a great holiday break and we're able to have some rest and relaxation to catch up on watching webinars and the course assignments and readings. And we're excited tonight to have two great speakers. So a quick review, your webinar experience will be better if you close all the other programs running on your computer, and if you're having problems with your sound, to switch to your telephone. And please type in your questions for the speakers during the presentation, and that will facilitate our question and answer period. And if there's a burning question during the presentation that something doesn't make sense that we need to address at that time, we'll try to do that. So please let us know. So today's speakers are Eric Zachariason from the Zachariason Partnership in Pullman, Washington, and Melissa Lyons with Skylines Farm in Harvard. Cinda is going to be turning the slides for each of our presenters tonight, and I'm Colette D. Phelps, and I'll be your webinar facilitator. So we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Melissa. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Colette. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. I hope you guys all had a great holiday season. I know I did. What I'm going to be talking about tonight is, as you know, I'm the livestock person. I'm going to be talking about sustainable livestock management. Next slide, Cinda, please. And I know that about half of you are planning on or already do have livestock in your operations. And so what I want to talk today about is how that is such an important part, an integral part of your sustainable whole farm plan. If your livestock are happy, healthy, and productive, they're being more productive. They're part of your operation. They're making you money. They're giving you joy. One of the great things about this style of management is you're going to be able to reduce or sometimes eliminate need for using chemicals in your operation, which a lot of us agree is a good thing in terms of the environment and in terms of our pocketbooks. You know, if we can minimize our off-farm inputs, we're ahead of the game. And another advantage is by maintaining healthy animals and reducing chemical use, we're just maintaining the diversity and health of our entire farm. Next slide, Cinda. I have asked Colette to send out a very extensive list of resources about practices for raising specific types of livestock. And because what I want to focus on tonight is practices that apply to whatever species you're raising, the practices, the underlying practices as you operate your farm that are going to keep your animals healthy, happy, and productive. Certainly we want to start with healthy stock. You know, it doesn't do you any favor to bring sick animals onto your farm. Obviously, we don't want to do that. The next two most critical things are learning for your species how to meet their environmental needs and their nutritional needs. My goal is to get you thinking about farm biosecurity to keep your animals healthy and reduce the chances for bringing disease onto your farm. A health management plan. I'm going to use the word plan quite often in this talk. Plan ahead for what you're going to do to manage their health. Observe, observe, observe. That's one of the great joys of what we do, and it's also your job, and it has great benefits. And I'm also going to talk a bit about rotational grazing of pastures. As part of your whole farm sustainable program, it's going to help your soil, your feed, the flora and fauna on your property. It's just such an integral part. Next slide, please. So let's start out with buying healthy stock. There are several choices of where you can get animals, and this list is starting with the best down to the worst. The very best way to buy animals and make sure you're getting healthy ones is to go to the farm where they were raised. Look around, see what the other animals look like. see what the farmer's operation is, see how they manage them. That's your best assurance that you're going to be bringing home healthy animals. And the second best choice would be what's called a production sale. Someone raises a particular species of animal, and once a year they have a sale of all the young ones that they are offering to the public. That's good. I personally would prefer to go to the farm rather than in a sale barn, but so that you can see what the rest of the animals on the farm look like. A liquidation sale, it's the same thing, but there is one possible drawback, and that is make sure you find out why they're liquidating. Is it just that they're retiring and they're going out of business? Have they had health issues on their farm? These are the kinds of questions to ask. A show barn, it's very tempting to buy animals from a show barn. You know, people pretty up their animals, they get them all washed and groomed, and they look beautiful to go into the show ring, and that's great. But it really doesn't tell you a lot about what that farmer's entire operation is like. What do the rest of the animals look like? And the other, of course, drawback to that is these animals have been in a show barn with countless other animals who may or may not have come to the show sick. Most shows I've found don't really do what I consider a good job of isolating each pen of animals. They're often right next to each other with open panels in between, so they could sneeze on each other, cough on each other. It's just something to be aware of, that there is a risk involved. The least favorite place to buy stock is a livestock auction. If you've ever been to one, you know thousands of animals go through that sale yard and through that show ring every year. You don't know where they came from. You don't know what they might be tracking in on their feet, and what any animals you buy there might be bringing home to your farm. Stuff to think about on where you're going to buy your animals. You could see ads on Craigslist, that's fine, but go to the farm. Go to the farm whenever possible. Next slide, Cinda. The next major concern is designing your system to provide environmental conditions that are conducive to fabulous health. Now, you see all over the country, all over the world, animals standing outside in the middle of a field, no shelter. They look fine. They're probably doing fine, especially hardier species like cattle. But stress is stress, and we know this in our own lives. Stress does take its toll, and if you're caring for these animals to make a living, help keep your grass eaten down, or give you pleasure, whatever the reason is, why wouldn't you try and minimize their stress as much as possible? It can be as simple as just putting up a windbreak of tall trees to block the wind. A wooded area provides, as you can see from this picture, great shelter year-round. And I want to stop and mention here, I talked earlier in one of the earlier webinars about grazing my animals in the woods all year round. They have open pastures and woods for shelter. And somebody asked me, doesn't that kill the trees? Well, I think the key here is if you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 trees in your pasture, they probably will kill them. It's just a matter of time. If they hang out under those trees long enough, their manure and urine is just going to overpower the tree. I think this kind of situation will work if you have multiple trees, and if you can rotate them through pastures with the trees, so the trees have weeks and weeks to rest, and then maybe 5 months over the winter. Because as I said, I have not had a problem with my 30 acres of woods losing trees to sheep hanging out underneath trees, but their manure is spread out all over the entire property. The next thing is minimizing mud and manure in areas where they hang out. This is key. Boy, mud and manure harbor disease. They're tracking it around in their hooves. You certainly can have problems such as hoof rot. Lying in wet mud, wet manure. Udders, for example, with female animals, udders get dirty. Their babies are trying to nurse through that mud and dirt. Just not a good situation. Cinda, next slide. Another environmental condition, should you decide to build sheds or a barn, make sure they're open and airy so air can flow through and clean it out. I've been to barns that were as tight as my house, and people think they're doing their animals a favor, building a nice, tight, airtight, secure barn. But what I always suggest people do, and I do this in all my workshops, is get down on your knees. Get down on your knees and elbows and take a sniff. See what it's like down there. If it smells like ammonia, just imagine what it's like for these young animals who are exposed to it 24/7. Or this little guy on the left, he's minutes old. He was just born. Just think if his first breath and his first week of breathing is heavy with ammonia fumes, that's going to compromise his lungs. This is just, it's sort of a no-brainer, but it's really good to be reminded of these things. Clean, dry bedding. I am not suggesting that you need to clean out your barn every month or every week. In fact, if animals are still in there, that's doing them a disservice because you're stirring up all those pathogens flying around in the air. What a lot of people do, and works very effectively, is what they call the deep bedding method. When it's soiled, you put down fresh bedding, whether it be hay or straw or wood chips, whatever you're using, and you build it up and build it up, and then once a year or however often you need to do it, you clean it out. When the animals have moved out to, say, pasture is a good time to do that. Next slide, Cinda. Just think about what they're breathing. This is one, this is one of my favorite topics. This is what I like to call a conga line. This is a line of sheep coming in from their winter pasture on their daily trek to get a drink of water. Now, as I've talked about already in my webinars, I just think this is so important, if at all possible, to set up your system so your animals have to move. Because, you know, they're like us, they're lazy. If they only have to walk 6 feet in a day to go get their water or go get their food, especially in the winter, that's all they're going to do. And standing around is not only hard on your health, your overall health and vigor, but if it's a breeding animal, it makes a huge difference to get exercise in terms of carrying her babies and delivering her babies. So whatever size property you have, just I want to plant this seed. Think about how I could set it up to make those critters, whatever they are, exercise every day. You know, I suppose I could have gone out and bought a sheep treadmill, but that seems a little ridiculous. Let them do the work. Even if you have the smallest paddock, you could probably set it up so you've got water at one end and you feed them at the other end. And maybe the minerals at a third corner. Make them move. Make them move, please. Next slide, Cinda. A next really important component of health is meeting the nutritional needs of the animal, whatever the species. And it's well documented that it's so much smarter, not only from a humane level, but it's from a financial level. Keep them healthy by feeding them well, rather than scrimping on feed. Oh, they can eat anything, and then having sick animals, which is heartbreaking. It's a lot of work and it's expense, and they're not as productive.